And thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program. My name is David Zyla. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Arts Club, we're a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts and to educate the American people in the fine arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, lectures, theatrical and musical performances, and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Following the conversation, there will be a brief Q&A, so please feel free to use the chat feature to ask any questions that you might have. So today, I'm extraordinarily excited to welcome to NAC at Home, Paul Tazewell. So let me tell you a little bit about him. Paul Tazewell has been designing costumes for Broadway, regional theater, film and television, dance and opera for close to 30 years. He began his Broadway career with the groundbreaking musical Bringin' de Noise, Bringin' de Funk, directed by George C. Wolfe. Most recently, Paul is known for his work with both of Lin-Manuel Miranda's Tony Award-winning original Broadway productions of Hamilton and In the Heights. Other Broadway credits include Ain't Too Proud, The Color Purple, Dr. Zhivago, Memphis, Caroline or Change, Elaine Stritch at Liberty, Russell Simmons' Deaf Poetry Jam, Lombardi, and Magic Bird. Revival work includes Sideshow, A Streetcar Named Desire, Jesus Christ Superstar, Guys and Dolls, A Raisin in the Sun, and On the Town. In the United States and across the globe, Paul has designed for such renowned companies as the Metropolitan Opera, the Bolshoi Ballet, the English National Opera, Theatre du Châtelet, the Public Theater, the National Theater, the Kennedy Center, the Guthrie Theater, Arena Stage, Houston Grand Opera, San Francisco Opera, and many more. His feature film credits include Harriet for Focus Features, Hamilton for Disney Plus, and the yet-to-be-released West Side Story, directed by Steven Spielberg. TV credits include the HBO original film, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, starring Oprah Winfrey, and both The Wiz Live and Jesus Christ Superstar live in concert for NBC. In 2016, he received an Emmy Award for NBC's The Wiz Live, as well as a Tony Award for Hamilton. Other notable honors include 2 Lucille Lortel Awards, 4 Helen Hayes Awards, a Princess Grace Foundation Fellowship, and the Princess Grace Statue Award. Paul holds an MFA from New York University and a BFA from North Carolina School of the Arts. He has been privileged instructing students as a guest artist at both New York University and North Carolina School of the Arts. From 2003 to 2006, he held a faculty position at Carnegie Mellon University. Without further ado, welcome, Paul Tazewell.
Hi, David. How are you?
Very well. We are so excited to chat with you today about your absolutely incredible career and immense talents. And I'm wondering if we might start by looking at what were the early influences in your life that you would say prompted you to say, I'm going to go into a creative field?
Oh, well, I mean, I would give credit, a huge amount of credit to my mother. I mean, she was, just a marvel at raising myself and 3 other brothers, and exposing us to all kinds of culture. She was a painter herself, and she also, she taught me how to sew. She would give puppet shows at the library and at church. She was always writing church plays and directing and producing those. So, definitely that was the start. That was the beginning. I fell in love with theater when I was probably in junior high. And I ended up going to a high school that was a magnet school, and it had a performing arts program. And that was where I fell in love with the world of performance. You know, I was going to be the next Ben Vereen. I wanted to be a song and dance man. And at the same time, I also loved clothing and I loved creating costumes. And so I was both in the productions, the musical productions at my high school, and also designing the costumes for those same productions. I ended up going to Pratt Institute for a year and studied fashion, but mainly so that I could be in the city and in New York City. Then after a year and a huge amount of culture shock, I ended up transferring to North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem. And then I returned, as you said, to NYU to finish my graduate study. And soon after that, I started working professionally. I was very fortunate to come onto the scene pretty quickly. And that was at the Arena Stage. And that was because of Tazwell Thompson, who was at the time a young director. He was the artistic associate with Zelda Fitchhandler there at the Arena Stage. And I was invited to design a number of productions there, and then ended up being the resident costume designer. I mean, when you think about, you know, I would say, you know, all of the Broadway productions that were being produced in and around that time, those productions that I saw, you know, would have been Barnum, Dreamgirls, Cats. So those designers, as a costume designer, those designers were my biggest influence. Also, you know, when I was in high school, those later years of high school, there were a number of trips that we took to the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario. And so seeing that work as well, that excellent work, and Desmond Healy's work, you know, on a number of productions up there, was very formative as far as my costume design eye. Then, you know, it just continued along. You know, my instructors at NYU, Carrie Robbins, very, very influential, and John Conklin, extremely influential as well. And Fred Vopel, definitely so, and Oliver Smith. So, you know, a lot of the greats that came before me, you know, were great influence.
Wonderful, wonderful. So much amazing influence in your background. So, Paul, I'm curious, did you have a mentor?
I would say the closest would have been Greg Barnes, but I mean, you know, he was you know, we were somewhat close in age. I mean, he graduated maybe 4 years maybe ahead of me. But he was when I was at NYU, he was running the costume shop in the undergrad department, and I ended up working as an assistant for him on a number of shows. But, you know, it was interesting to, you know, I would witness how he made his way through as a young designer, because his career was just blossoming, and he was starting to work all over the country and in New York on Broadway. You know, it was just, it was invaluable to spend time with him. His sensibility, you know, the two of us together, we share you know, the way that we see design. Yeah, I would definitely, you know, I would say that Greg was a huge mentor. You know, and you know, as well, the teachers that I had there at NYU as well. Yeah.
Paul, what project would you say would you determine as your big break or the game changer in your career?
I would say Bring It to Noise, Bring It to Funk. Meeting George C. Wolfe was really, you know, life-changing. It was to meet a director that was, you know, just so very smart in how he saw producing and directing theater, and what his priorities were as a director, and for designers as well, the vision that they brought to the event. And just the conversations were thrilling, and also very challenging, and challenging how I see design. And I carry him with me, as I think about what he might say about, a conceptual idea, or, a certain direction. And so that was, that was a huge time for me. I mean, he was, with Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, also Tony Kushner's and Janine Tesori's Carolina Change. I mean, both of those productions were, started to change the landscape of American musical theater. I mean, the way that stories were being told, the way that stories were being told about people of color as well, and how music was used and how poetry is used. And to be a part of those productions was, I was hugely fortunate, and early on in being able to do that. And that came, I mean, I started working professionally probably 1991, and then Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk came along around 1996. So it was early into my career that I got the opportunity to work on Broadway. And then there was a period of time that, it kind of slumped off, and I was doing a lot of work regionally, all over the country. So, that was it, working both at the Arena Stage with an amazing shop, very talented group of costume creators. And then also at all these other shops and, theaters around the country, but they all had costume shops as well. And I had the opportunity to really hone my skills. And that was outside of New York, which meant outside of kind of focus, a media focus, so I could really perfect what it was that I do. And I think that I look at my work and I can continue to try and refine as much as possible what I do and what my approach is.
So, Paul, you have such an amazing background and a lot of projects on Broadway, and you have won a number of awards. I am curious, what is the exact range of emotions one goes through from being nominated to winning something like a Tony?
Oh my gosh, it's it's a lifetime full of emotions, I have to say. I mean, and I think that it changes. The first time that you're nominated for a Tony, like I was nominated for a Tony for Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk, and it was a shock one for me, and because it was my first Broadway show, and then you go through a process of, oh, there's who are the other people that are nominated, and no, I'm not gonna, I won't get it, I don't deserve it, because there are these other shows that and designers that have been doing this much longer than I have, and then you find yourself sitting in the theater all dressed up in your tuxedo, and for me, my stomach was in knots. I mean, and for any, even up to Hamilton, which was my 6th nomination, and I was sitting there just in knots. And I think that what was different for Hamilton was that I deeply wanted it so very much for that production. To be acknowledged for that production was I couldn't receive a better gift, and it was just because of my investment in the design and in the whole group, the people that I worked with, and telling that story was just a beautiful experience.
Wonderful, and very well deserved.
Thank you.
So speaking of Hamilton, when one is putting together a Broadway musical, there are so many elements involved, from the writing, directing, choreography, casting, design, etc. When it all comes together, it's pretty darn magical. What do you attribute the Hamilton magic to, where every element came together so absolutely perfectly?
every person that was involved with Hamilton, every designer, every performer, obviously director, Lynn, everyone backstage, all the stagehands, everybody had one intention, and that was to lift up and make Hamilton the best production that it could possibly be. We spent so much time, oftentimes in David Corns's office in his design studio. All of the collaborators, talking for hours about how do we best serve this piece? How do we make the most of what Lynn has given us to realize? And I think that kind of commitment, that kind of involvement from each of the different departments was, it was one of the, I mean, you get it sometimes, or I experienced some of that on many different productions, but I think there was something about just the timing and the amount of time that we had to put it all together. The fact that we, did a workshop that was staged and then could use that information to inform how we were going to design the Broadway show. I mean, all of that, fell into place in a way that made the vision singular and clear, and really followed through with what Lynn's vision was.
So I'm curious, after, obviously you read the script, what do you recall the first thing you did in your process after completing that?
I usually jump to researching. I rely very, very heavily on research, and it's not that it will always be, kind of bound to a specific year. I mean, many people who know my work, it indeed isn't. I'm often called on to meld, multiple periods, or have a feeling of modern, kind of a modern vision on a period world. For Hamilton, because it's about somebody who actually existed. It happens to be about, a group of men, our founding fathers, and their surrounding families' lives that we know very well, because those of us that that grew up here and went to American schools are introduced to Washington and Thomas Jefferson, and there is a myth around these men, and also our Constitution is based on all of the work that they did, everything that they believed around, what it was to be an American, what it was to be a new country. So, knowing that and realizing that, and also seeing how many images we have in, that we have access to, and much of my work was, much of the research was done online. I mean, I was pulling images from everywhere that I could, as well as books, about these men as well. Very early on, once I had, I was familiar with the work, I realized that our interpretation of what this story is that we know so well was going to be completely different. And how we were going to make the history that we know blend with and marry with a sensibility and a sound quality and casting that was outside of the box for telling the story. We needed to handle that in a very careful way. And so, as we were stepping into it, and working our way through looking at images and figuring out, is it going to be, 1780s, or is it going to be, 2015, and what is that grayscale in between, and how will one inform the other? it was really picking it apart and figuring out, what made the most sense.
Paul, I think it's time for us to look at some of your work and also take a look at your design process for Hamilton.
Certainly, certainly. I'd be happy to. Yeah, very good. So this, this presentation I've started for you just to give you a sense of what my experience was prior to Hamilton. This was a Broadway production of A Raisin in the Sun with Sean Puffy Combs, Felicia Rashad, Audra McDonald. It was obviously it was a revival. And very straightforward, a straightforward telling of this play. You can keep going. And it was directed by Kenny Leon as well. Another notable Broadway musical that I did was The Color Purple. It was the first version of The Color Purple that Oprah Winfrey was the producer on. Gary Griffin was the director. It was starring LaChanze. You can keep going. And this, so this was, a big Broadway musical with lots of costumes. The story as is the movie, based on the Alice Walker novel. You can keep going. That's LaChanze. And then, the very straightforward musical, well-known musical, Guys and Dolls, that Des McAnuff directed. It was the revival that was done in 2009. And this was set in the 1930s. So again, a big, splashy, traditional Broadway musical. And then there was In the Heights, which was the first production that I worked on, that I collaborated with Tommy Kail, who was the director, that Lin-Manuel Miranda had written. That was the beginning of our collaborative relationship with the whole team. This is Memphis, that Christopher Ashley directed. Montego Glover, who's in the center in the red dress, plays a blues singer in Memphis, Tennessee. And this is Sideshow that Bill Condon directed. It's the revival of Sideshow that actually Greg Barnes had designed years before. But this take was a much more naturalistic look at the world of Carney, of the Carney, kind of Carney culture, as well as the Hilton sisters, the conjoined twins. And this is Dr. Zhivago, a take based on the film from the 1960s. I was very proud of the clothing, because there were a lot of, it was all period clothing, reflective of the Russian Revolution. I was very happy with how the look turned out.
So beautiful.
Thank you. This is Summer, the Donna Summer musical, based on the life of Donna Summer and disco, but with a thematically with a gender neutral kind of feel all the way through. We had a lot of cross gender casting, mainly women playing men back and forth. And this was directed by Des McAnuff. And this was the first of the NBC television spots that I did. There had been another musical that had been presented that I wasn't a part of for NBC. I think that was Peter Pan, and then this. Well, actually, they did Peter Pan and then The Sound of Music. So The Wiz Live was directed by Kenny Leon. The production design was by Derek McLean, and yeah, it was interesting to circle back, having designed The Wiz for my high school when I was a junior in high school. And then a couple of times after that, I designed it and then was asked to design for NBC Live. That was great. It was a great honor. And working with some amazing costume builders as well as makeup artists, Dave and Lou Elsey, that came out of the film world, and wanting to figure out how they could make kind of movie film makeup quick changeable. And then Jesus Christ Superstar Live with John Legend was another. This was another, kind of not a repeat, but I had designed Jesus Christ Superstar, directed by Des McAnuff, for Broadway, and then to revisit that same production or a version of that production for television was really exciting, and to look at it from a different take. These are the priests, and this is Judas at the very end. And this is a still from The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks with Oprah Winfrey there in the center. And Cynthia Erivo as Harriet Tubman in Harriet. So with Hamilton, just to start that, we spoke, David and I spoke a little bit about this. When I was asked to do this, I was handed the script and given some snippets of the music, and then finally we were able to hear, the whole score. But it was, to introduce myself to the piece, it was, it took a little bit of warming up, because, when you're reading it, you don't necessarily get the rhythm of how it's going to be spoken, how, and song as well. So once I started to hear it, then I was, on one side, putting my, design brain around what this was going to be period-wise and how to make sense of that and these people that we already knew, and then orally, hearing how it was going to be performed and presented. So you see with Hamilton and with Burr, what I've presented to you, that's where you start. That's it's so you as a designer, I'm like, okay, so this is who these characters are. How are we going to abstract this and still be able to tell the story effectively? And you also have all, our forefathers as well: Washington, Jefferson, Lafayette. And then also the actual Eliza Hamilton and Angelica Schuyler, and George III and his troops, British troops. So I started to collect both those images that you saw before, and these images, of actual clothing from the period, of the late 18th century, and then into the very early 19th century. And so all of these examples are out there, to be had and studied and recreated. And it was, much of the conversation that, as I was saying, that when we were sitting with the collaborators together in David Korn's office, we were working through along with Tommy Kail, how can we best merge these two sensibilities? So, I was delivering up what was very traditional and what was accurate, to this time period and what people wore. And then, looking at other images, like Kehinde Wiley, an amazing painter who, is painting, more, men of color, but representing them in this kind of classic way, this kind of painterly, beautifully painterly way, in a classic form that's normally been reserved for dukes and kings and indeed founding fathers. So it's trying to gain some through line and some balance visually between these two worlds. The idea of fashion and how contemporary fashion designers use and borrow inspiration from earlier periods and indeed from the 18th century, and if that's, if that was a lens into how I could represent this whole design, this whole story. And then thinking about hair and how where are our equivalents? When you've got powdered wigs versus men that are cornrowing their hair and blowing it out and pulling it back, and so. For me, I'm looking at it in a very organic way that will allow a modern audience to identify with those characters that they're seeing in front of them. So these are, what was set up, and what I was explaining earlier is that, I was given the script, all the other, audio information, and then told by Tommy that they were planning on doing a reading. A reading had been done, and it was all done at music stands. So the whole cast was sitting there in front of us, in an audience, in a studio actually, and they were all standing at music stands, pretty static, and singing and reading through the script. So, and it was like a backers audition, or, just to get more producer types interested in the production. And the next step, and this was after the public and Oscar Eustis at the Public Theater in New York, he took the production of Hamilton under his wing, to bring it to the stage at the Public Theater. Under that auspices, we ended up doing a staged reading so that Andy Blankenmuller could work out the choreography and what direction he was going with the choreography. You can see in these photographs, this is us in one of the upstairs studios at the Public Theater, full of racks and racks of costumes that I was able to pull from their costume stock that they've had over the years. I mean, it's since the 70s, clothes that they've used in productions in the park, in Central Park, some productions that they've done at the Public Theater as well. And it was, many different periods, but I was trying to organically develop what the potential of what that silhouette might be. The reason that you're seeing mostly kind of 18th century silhouettes is because Tommy and I decided that it was best, Tommy Kail and I decided that it was best to just try this out. Because even at this point, when I was doing all of these fittings, I wasn't sure if we were going to end up doing it as an 18th century take on telling the story, or if we were going to do it in a contemporary take, you know, being in jeans and sneakers and t-shirts and leather jackets. I mean, I was open to either interpretation, but the best way of actually investigating that was to literally do it. So I dressed the whole cast in, you know, the 18th century silhouette, and worked to hold it together. I mean, you know, all of these costumes were costumes from many, many different productions. So to try and figure out what will keep this as a unit, what will have it feel like it is a connective presentation. And that was where the idea of the parchment look was born. It was really a means, you know, of function, where, you know, it was just, you know, visually holding the cast together as a group. And then as characters are realized in front of our eyes within the audience, as they are realized as Hamilton being the first, he shucks off his parchment coat and puts on a brown leather coat, and he becomes Hamilton in front of our eyes. And then, you know, consequently with each other principal character, they do the same thing. They take on a specific color, and then their color palette tends to stay the same throughout the production, the rest of the telling, just because I'm using it as a device. This is, you know, jumping into, you know, after the production, the stage reading, we then went into building the costumes for the public and then for the Broadway show. Most of these, the images that you'll see after this, are from the Broadway show, the fittings that we did for the Broadway show. And for any of you who is not aware of the process, I mean, all of the clothes for Hamilton are custom made. You know, and they all are beautifully built by, you know, master tailors and dressmakers. This is Eliza Jefferson, or David Diggs as Jefferson, and Renee Goldsberry as Angelica. And the King, and Peggy. And you can see in this one, you know, the detail that goes into, you know, much of the work. I mean, one of the beautiful things about the filming of Hamilton for Disney Plus is that you do end up seeing all the detail that was put into the costumes that I knew at some point would be seen. But it's, you know, even when you're seeing it on stage, you know, as subtly as it is, you're aware of the texture of it, and I think that it really adds to the quality of the clothes overall. And then this is the expansive parchment, or the ensemble in parchment, the way that we see them at the very beginning. And you can see Hamilton crossing up above, on the catwalk up above. And this is all the fully realized production photos. I feel like Hamilton, looking back at it, in retrospect, I would not have been able to design Hamilton in the way that I designed it without everything that came before it. Without having done all of the other productions about city life in New York, or the world of hip hop, or in the Heights and the community of Washington Heights, because my love of research and period work and period clothing and investigating that, as well as my love of interpreting character, modern character in a fully rendered way. Both of those coming together and everything in between led me to be able to make decisions about Hamilton. And that's the end of the presentation.
Oh, it's such a treat to revisit this amazing show. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you also for telling us about your process. I'm curious, I have one general question that obviously is something you touched upon with Hamilton, with the idea of this parchment starting point, and then almost like filling in the silhouettes with color and detail. I'm curious about how, generally speaking, the evolution of a character in a play or film impacts their wardrobe, or how does how can the wardrobe inform the evolution of a character?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that it greatly so. It took me. I mean, when I first started designing costumes, I just loved the world of costumes. And then you learn, you go to school and you learn about, how do you mount a show? How do you mount all of the costumes? Building them, and knowing how they're built, and the ins and outs and the logistics of making that happen. It was not until maybe the middle of, what is my career to date, that I really started to understand the power of the work that we do as costume designers. That we're delivering the first image of a character without, a character even saying anything. I mean, we make the first impact as far as the story and who these characters are, and how their story will potentially open up and be realized. That is what the expression is, the theatrical expression is. But we also, as costume designers, are in a place of service. I mean, we are working with actors to support them and to give them what they need in order to do the work that they need to do, which is indeed to tell the story. I think that, when it's done well, it makes a huge difference, and I think that is, that you oftentimes, you think, well, the people that are in, backstage, or the people that you don't really think of or hear about are lesser than, that it's all about the actors that are up front and, making their bow at the end of the show. And indeed, it takes so many different people in order to, especially a musical, in order to make a musical work. And I think that it's important for every different role to acknowledge the beauty and the importance that they bring to the event.
So you just touched upon this partnership with an actor to help realize the character. I'm curious, have you ever worked on a project where the casting that was in your mind and your original concept was completely different from the person who came to that first fitting?
I usually know before I've had a fitting with them, but yes, indeed, it can't help but change how you see, what a character will be. And it calls on me as a designer to make a different choice, potentially. I can reinterpret the same design on a different kind of body and a different, just a different character quality. But I think that that's where you have to work organically and smart, think smartly about, who is the actor that's playing this role, and how is the way that they're going to play that role going to end up being different than this other person that was originally going to play the role. And so you start to shift how that will be projected and make changes accordingly. I mean, it might be, simplifying the style lines, or changing the color, or changing the fabric, or there are a number of different ways that we have at our disposal for making adjustments and still being that character as it's written. But it's inevitably going to change overall how that character is being played. Definitely.
Has there been a project where you knew a choice was absolutely correct, and it took some convincing for the director, actor, or producers to get on board? And if so, I'm curious how you accomplished it.
It's interesting. Nothing is coming to mind, and I don't know if it is. I think, well, what this speaks to is communication. Mm-hmm. And always being connected to your director and understanding what their point of view is and what their intent is in telling the story. I don't know that I push an idea. I mean, I suggest, and I will usually offer a director 3 different choices of a look, let's say. And that starts to identify who that character is. And I think that it's important to know, for me, to know that I have many different ideas, different points of view that I can call on. And not one is going to be the absolute direction. So I think that that's where, as a designer, I stay flexible, and I can pivot when I feel like the director and the other collaborators are also pivoting, so that I can stay on board. I think that if you are as a designer, it is to your detriment to kind of dig in your heels and feel like yours is the only way to go. I think that because it's happening organically, and it's happening with so many different people and so many different people making decisions. And it's always going to shift and change. And so I have to be able to shift and change along with the rest of the company. I mean, we do get to a place where we're committed to the direction that we're going, because these are the costumes that, these were the costumes that are approved, and that's what we're building. So we can't veer that far off of it. But there are definitely times when you'll have a muslin fitting, and the fabric is chosen, it's bought, it's been approved, and someone decides that it needs to be a different color. And so you go out and you buy another few yards of a different color, and you make the costume, and you're better for it. And I think that it's because in the rehearsal room, things have shifted and changed, and you can't be every place at once. So you're relying on them to say, okay, well, we're going in a slightly different direction. I mean, that happened with Hamilton, where it wasn't just in the rehearsal room. It was after seeing the whole run at the Public Theater. We changed the whole palette for Jefferson because Tommy started to see him as kind of a rock and roll idol in a way. He was this kind of Jimi Hendrix, and he wanted for it to feel a little more showy. And the brown tone that I had chosen originally for Jefferson wasn't serving how he wanted to then interpret David Diggs as Jefferson.
Interesting, interesting. You have worked in many different mediums, and I'm curious if you would tell us some of the main differences between working in theater, opera, film, and television.
Well, I have to say it starts from the same place. I mean, it is about a piece of work that's written, and it's text or it's music, and you have a director and or a choreographer that is about interpreting the story that's being presented. So that starts at the same place. And the way that I research starts from the same place. When you're dealing with a film, how the scenes are realized. There are more scenes that are often part of a film than there are in a musical or a play. And there's much more background that you have to be mindful of. So I'm still using all the same muscles as a designer, and as much as I can, making decisions about as many people that will be on screen as possible. As long as I have the support system that understands my sensibility and that is giving their A game to making this world along with me, the process stays somewhat the same. And there's organizing that goes along, goes into doing film, because you're oftentimes shooting out of sequence. You have to be mindful of multiple costumes that need to do certain things, whether it's showing a progression of getting just dirtier and dirtier, or more distressed, or needing to go into the water, like on Harriet, she had to cross a river along with the rest of her passengers. So she did, as well as all of her passengers, needed 6 different versions of that same costume, so that every time that the director wanted to shoot that, there was a dry costume for them to go into. So you have to then wrap your brain around what are all of your needs going to be, and then how do I fit all of that into the budget that's given to the costumes. And that is, it just it extends what the need is. But even with Broadway theater, there's a lot of focus around if you've got dancers who need to do their work, you better make sure that those shoes fit them well, and as a designer, hopefully they're styled in a way that is more like say with West Side Story, more like a 1950s shoe than it is like a theatrical shoe. And so it's just, for me, it's trying to get the look, whatever the look might be, to get it to be as specifically true to that story as possible. And it doesn't matter whether it's a Broadway show or if it's film.
You mentioned West Side Story, which of course is one of the most highly anticipated cinema events in this decade. I'm curious about your process of designing that piece. And I'm curious also if the design of the original play or film had any impact or flavoring of your current designs.
Yeah. The film of West Side Story, is hugely beloved, by people, definitely by people in the musical theater industry, and by America overall. And it was one of the first musicals that I ever was introduced to on stage, because I was in it, and it was when I was in high school. So it's been in my life for a long time. And the images, the clothing, the design that Irene Sheriff designed for that production, that had become so iconic. It's hard to get that out of your head. When I was at I was at Western Costumes, we used clothes from that rental company. It's a rental company of costumes in LA, in Los Angeles. And I was invited in to see some of their archives, some of the research archives that they have. And they actually had her color palette charts of fabric from, this is Irene Sheriff's original color palette charts. And to see how she was putting together color was, it was beautiful and amazing. I mean, it was just, it was amazing to actually be holding, what has become such an iconic look, as well as clothes that they've been able to find, and they house them there. They're not very many, but there are a few pieces. And through that process, I realized that everyone that is familiar with that film is going to be carrying the look of that film. And that's daunting for a designer, because I'm not about trying to outdo what Irene Sheriff did. I just want for it to be right for the production that Steven Spielberg is directing. And at a certain point, that's what I had to do, is I had to set that aside and know that, it's a different director, it's a different designer. We will have our own vision, and hopefully we can create an iconic version of this film, even though there has already been a much loved film created. I thought about the points that you have to hit, and much of that, when you say how did that earlier film inform what I did, it was being able to see what I responded to emotionally throughout the film, throughout the original film, so that I can then make sure that I'm hitting those same points in a similar fashion, not in the same color, but that there are quality, the way that the skirts move, and some of the importance of what that is as you see this whole story kind of play throughout throughout the evening. So I think that we did a pretty great job. I'm really excited about the work, and and there were two things that Stephen had requested, and that was, one was the white dress for Maria with the red belt, and that was for the dance of the gym, and then also red shirt for Bernardo for the prologue at the very beginning. And Bernardo was the head of the Sharks, and also Maria's brother. But those were his only requests, and the rest came out of the research that I was able to find. And that was, it was all born out of mostly photographs from the period, and from New York and Brooklyn, and actual gangs that were around at that time.
Paul, we have so many questions. Our audience just cannot get enough of you. We're going to take just a few of them. So Rayana asks, what's a fundamental skill that you believe a costume designer should have?
Communication, the ability to communicate, because and it's in multiple ways, because you need to be able to communicate with your director and what your idea is. And that might come through drawing it out through a sketch and painting. It might come through putting together a collage of images, but you have to be able to communicate, to hear what the director is saying and asking for, and to communicate to that director what your idea is and what your interpretation of their, potentially their point of view is. So that's very important. And then you carry that into the actor, and how you communicate what the idea is, and then how you hear, again, how you hear what their point of view is as well, so you can serve that. And then being able to collaborate with the builders that are making the costumes. So, it's very much, a high people skill, profession, where you really do need to engage all the way through.
Stella asks if you have a favorite costume of all time.
No, I have a lot. I have a number of costumes that are my favorites. Oh gosh. I think that there are things, the first thing that comes to mind is the Schuyler sister dresses, and kind of, talking about iconic. I mean, how they become kind of iconic, but then also how they're luminous, and they're an expression of who those actors were as these women, excited to be young and socialites in New York City at that time. I mean, I think that those dresses were the embodiment of that energy. So I love that as a quality. I really fell in love with Glinda's dress coming in, kind of sparkling with light. It was for the Wiz Live that Uzo Aduba wore, and it also took a lot of work to figure that out, and all the electronics. Oh my gosh! I mean, I think I love, for West Side Story, I think that Anita's dress for America, I really loved how that turned out. I mean, but once I design it, I kind of let it go, and I don't spend a lot of time reflecting on, if it serves the moment, and if it gives me a certain feeling that, visceral feeling that I think is appropriate for the scene, then I feel good. I feel like I've accomplished what I needed to accomplish, and I move on to the next thing.
Paul, what would the advice be to someone interested in going into your profession?
There are so many programs that are out there in the world, university programs, graduate school programs, that I think are amazing and have amazing instructors as heads of them, and doing a great job in teaching. I think that either before that, along with that, or after that, I think it's developing a hunger for imagery and experience, and things that are outside of costumes and outside of clothing. Being able to appreciate architecture, and appreciate paintings, and appreciate qualities that are expressions of life, because you're then, as a costume designer, going to be called on to interpret those specific to, you're using the medium of costumes, or clothing, but they're actually the other they're the other artistic points of view that you're interpreting through the clothing. So it's important to understand just visually everything that's coming at you. And drinking that in, putting it into a bank within your head, and being able to call on it. But it does require a certain kind of work ethic, where you're always after excellence. You put in the time to do your sketches, to figure out what your interpretation of the story. All of that is wrapped up in there. The reason that I do costumes, the costume design, is because it is this grand blend of everything that I love to do and that I'm passionate about. I love drawing and painting. I love fabric. I love the art of sewing, and everything that goes into that. I love sculpture, and the use of fabric to make sculpture, being costumes, being clothing. I love character development and character interpretation, and I love telling stories. And I love working with people, especially people that are very talented. So, I've found a profession where I can make use of all of that. And it's a good fit for me.
Well, we are so glad because we get the benefit of seeing your beautiful work. Paul
Thank you.
Tazewell, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. You truly are a major talent and a true inspiration. Um,
Thank you.
and
Thank
I
you
would
so
like
much, David.
Thank you. And I would like to thank our audience for joining us today. I'm David Zyla, and for more information on the National Arts Club and these programs, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.